I would put it to you, Mr. Wilson, that Ruben Amarim cannot lose that football match. He can lose against Liverpool on Sunday, they're top of the Premier League. He can lose against Arsenal in the FA Cup. It's not about the FA Cup for Manchester United this season. He cannot, after those two games, host Southampton, who are the worst Premier League side I've seen in years, and lose that game.
I feel so sorry for this kid. Getting booed off after 35 minutes at Old Trafford by your own fans, when you literally could have gone so many other places after last season.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 27 with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson. It is December the 31st, 2024, and this podcast will be a little review of the year just gone and a look ahead to what is set to be a gargantuan year of sport in 2025. And Olly, we just had a little 3 to 5 minute session there of negativity at the end of 2024 off pod, but 2025 is gonna be the year of relentless positivity and abundance and joy and sport and everything in between. So early happy new year to you, my friend.
Well, I want to start. I know we've got lots to get into. I know what we're starting with as a topic, but I need to just do some Christmas admin and some positivity to start this whole thing, right, Dave? So first and foremost, we are recording at 1:30 in the afternoon. Lovely sip of water for Mr. Windsor there. I, however, am going to be having a little sip of Buffalo Trace right now because I want to share the joy of being a sports broadcaster who's worked on the NFL for so many years and report to you that for the first time ever in my many years of doing it, I have won my NFL Fantasy League this year. Last night, Jared Goff picking up over 6 points, become the champion of the unpleasant word Eli Manning League. And so I am going to rejoice in a little Buffalo Trace while we podcast to see in the new year the right way. I've been for my run today, so I've got all that out of the way. The second thing, Dave, I want to do actually is something for yourself, because I sent you a picture of something the other day, which is a really nice gift that I gave to my dad. A Boka Juniors Christmas jumper. There's been a few of these flying around the place. And Mr. David Windsor, on the way to you in the next few days is this absolute beauty, because when there's Boka, there's always River.
Ollie, is that for me?
That is 100% for you.
Oh, mate, that's super generous. Thank you. For the audio listeners, you might not have grasped the beauty of that. So please do just check out our YouTube channel, Not Another Sports Pod, and look at the visual there, because it's absolutely glorious. And Mr. Wilson, I feel very inadequate now because I did not deliver a present to your good self. Unfortunately, that will be something I will. That was something I will look to rectify. And what have you got there, Mr. Wilson?
The 1990s classic Sampdoria Christmas jumper as well. So, a couple of last-minute additions. But, yeah, I actually think this might be one of the best Christmas jumpers I've seen with the red and white. It's very
Mate, that is absolutely fantastic. And I'm going to be wearing that in the office around Christmas 2025. You have my guarantee on that.
Santa number 11 on the back as well. I mean, that is
absolutely lovely stuff.
So, Merry Christmas to you, Dave. Merry Christmas
Likewise,
indeed, and
mate.
have a happy New Year as
Likewise,
well.
and I'm very hopeful for big things for NASP in 2025 as well, Ollie. I think it could be the year that we actually, at the moment, we kind of keep NASP a little secret and don't push it out into the world. But I think 2025 will be the year where we kind of give people a tap on the back and let them know on the best sports podcast they've never heard of. So, yeah, that's the big plan for NASP in 2025. And thank you to the listeners. A Merry Christmas to the listeners. Oh, it's getting very... It's
an emotional loving time here, goodwill to all men
completely,
and all that.
And thank you for the loyal listeners who've have listened so far, and it's great to we know we're never going to forget the real ones who listen to episodes 1 to 25, 26, 27. So yeah, you the loyal early listeners, much appreciated. Right, do you want to hear my 10 sporting predictions for 2025, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah. I want to see what the next calendar year has, and I want to know what I'm betting on. Basically, this is going to really align my 2025 gambling, I think.
As is probably reflective of my weighted sports knowledge, I've got 7 football, 2 tennis, and 1 other. I'm just going to reel them off, Ollie, and then you can dissect as you so please. Number one, in no particular order, but number one, Ruben Amarim will not be Manchester United manager by the end of 2025. At some point next year, he will lose his job. We can talk more about that as you wish. Jose Mourinho at number two will get one last chance in English football, possibly West Ham. Number three, English clubs will win two of the three European trophies on offer. The Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. English clubs will win two of those three. Number four, the Club World Cup will be a huge success. I don't agree with the more is more in football, but the Club World Cup next summer in the USA, the expanded Club World Cup, I believe will be the start of something fantastic in the game. I think it's going to be a huge success. Number five, Saudi Arabia will continue its trajectory as one of the powerhouses in global sport. Number six, Alexander Isak will become the highest, will be the largest ever transfer fee paid by a British club, smashing the Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo that Chelsea spent. I think he'll go for 120, 130 million next summer, possibly to Arsenal. Trent Alexander-Arnold will move to Real Madrid. Onto the tennis. Emma Raducanu will silence the critics and get back into the world top 20. And number 9, Novak Djokovic will win his 25th Grand Slam and will undisputably be the greatest tennis player across the men and women's game of all time. And at number 10, we will finally see Tyson Fury against Anthony Joshua. So those are my 10 predictions for 2025, Ollie. Any that jump out, any you agree with, disagree with, or anything in between?
The Alexander Isak one is one I knew was coming. And I very much enjoyed playing the Alexander Isak stock market game over messaging with you last night during the Newcastle-Manchester United game, determining how much his value was rising and falling with every chance he had. I think he will end up being at Arsenal. I think he'll end up being a £100 million plus transfer, even though I don't think it's the right thing to do. I don't think it'll be until next summer. I think if you're smart and if you're playing chess rather than checkers, if you're Arsenal, you go big on some undervalued pushes for him in January to turn the head. You have a word saying, don't down tools, but next summer we're coming for you. And then you have 6 months of him wanting to get out of Newcastle and get to Arsenal for next season. So I think that'd be the way to play it if it's going to happen. The Raducanu one is interesting. I don't know why. Have you seen? Because I'm not a huge tennis follower.
Let me show my work here then, Ollie. One is that she's hired a new dedicated fitness coach, which she never had before. Someone that's an absolute specialist and has worked with Naomi Osaka in the past. Someone who's going to solely work on her fitness, which has been, injuries and fitness have been really the main reason she's never been able to get close to what she did at the US Open a few years back. So that's a big one. I think the penny might have dropped in terms of her brand endorsements and her advertising. I say this because she's been criticised in the past of taking too much stuff of that on and not concentrating on the tennis. Financially, I completely understand that, by the way, but that's what she's done. So before the Aussie Open this year, Ollie, she has been in Australia and that part of the world for already the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So she went before Christmas. So opted not to spend Christmas in the UK and where she lives, and she's gone to Australia early to work on her fitness, her conditioning. She did actually just get injured the last couple of days, but I do believe that everything's teed up for Raducanu to take 2025 very seriously. I think she's 56th in the world at the moment. I think she breaks back into the top 20 and silences the critics.
That's fair. I'd like to see that because, it was always going to happen when she won the US Open. That marketing door was going to fly open because she's a good-looking woman who has reached the pinnacle, one of the pinnacles of her sport. It was always going to lead to a lot of kind of advertising, etc. And it's a shame when you see it flood like that. Everybody wants a piece of an athlete, and then you see the actual sporting side of them starts to fall away a little bit. So I would be willing to advocate for that to happen just on she seems like a pretty well-rounded person as well and is making right steps to push forward, and that's the best thing. Mourinho to West Ham.
Well, Mourinho will get one last shot in English football is my prediction. The West Ham feels like a fit, but yeah.
London-based, which he wants to be. I think if he comes back to the UK and comes back to England, I don't think he'd get a shot in at Liverpool, Manchester United, anybody like that. Tottenham wouldn't have him again. Chelsea probably wouldn't have him and don't need to have him at the moment. West Ham would make sense. I couldn't see a Mourinho at like a Brentford or anything.
Could you see him at Rangers or Celtic,
maybe.
by the way?
Nah.
Why? Because his ego wouldn't allow it.
I think Scottish football isn't high profile enough for him. It wouldn't give him a chance to really... Turkish football's probably more... It's got more money than Scottish football, I reckon. And, has a better profile across Europe, I think, as well. Particularly with the players that are there too. At least if you go to Turkey, to a Galatasaray or a Fenerbahce, there are some reasonably big names floating around the Turkish league, whereas... Like, no disrespect to Scottish football, but I guess there is some unintentionally here of like, it's just not a league that catches the eye, I think, of anybody else outside of Europe at all. So, or outside of Scotland at all, really. So, But I could see, I don't think he'll get another run at an English job, though. I think his stock has fallen too much, I think, for Premier League football. I think that's the trouble. So, might have to be in the Championship.
Let's I want to talk about Amorim separately after I hear your predictions. But let's go ahead, Ollie. You got a few in mind of your big sporting prediction for 2025?
Yeah, I mean, one's going to be early this year. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. That's not just a bias thing. I think they're just a great team. So the NFL is going to kind of finish in February with an Eagles Super Bowl win. I think that Europe will fail at the Ryder Cup this year at Bethpage in New York. That's one for me. I think we will not see Manchester City in a title push for 2025. I don't think they'll come back this year, and I think they'll start slow next year as kind of the Guardiola quick rebuild turnaround comes along. I was trying to think of some like rogue ones. There's not many. I don't see England going down to Australia and finishing off like next year with an Ashes victory or anything like that. Obviously, that's 25-26.
LeBron, retirement?
He's played with his son now, but I think, and he's just in the last month become the all-time minutes leader in the NBA. If there's a time, it's time to step away, it's now. But the trouble with the NBA is that they might pay LeBron more to keep him around because there's just no real pull in that league right now. They need somebody like a LeBron. We were chatting about great figures, etc. I think Caitlyn Clark becomes the highest paid female athlete on the planet. I think the WNBA and the NBA make a big push for that. And Rory McIlroy to win a major this year was one of my other ones that I'm thinking of. I think Rory's temperament in the back end of this year after what happened at the US Open, which was the greatest, that was the best moment of 2024 sports-wise. I think that finale to the US Open with DeChambeau and Rory live against the PGA, two big faces of each one going down the last few holes in an absolute nail-biter, and the drama that came from that was the best moment. And I think Rory will have learned from putting himself back in one of those situations again in a major, and I think he does pick up a major this year. So the drought finally comes to an end. Yeah.
What about NFL expansion? Just continues to expand and continues to play games abroad, and that's all on the agenda set.
Yeah, we've got more games. They're going to Berlin, they're going to Brazil, they're going to Madrid next year as well, and they're coming to the UK still. So we don't see an NFL team in Europe or anything like that, but we just see more games coming across. Yeah, for 2025, I'm pretty boring with it because I just see it being a continuation of what we've seen in 2024 for a large part. I don't know what major curveballs could really come our way, except maybe in the golfing world, and obviously we'll see what happens with the whole Live PGA merger and everything like that as that continues. I think by the end of 2025, we have every major golfer playing under the same banner outside of majors. I think that will be one that will be finally, even if it doesn't happen, the framework will be set up maybe for 2026 and we'll get it all back together, which is only going to be a good thing for golf.
And what do you think about my prediction of the Club World Cup being a big event? I just think that whilst you can certainly make pros and cons for the Nations League and the Conference League and an expanded World Cup and this expanded Champions League, I can see negative elements to all of that. The Club World Cup feels to me in an extremely globalized world as long overdue in this kind of format, to have your River Plate and your Chelsea and your club from Australia and Japan and MLS club, all in this big mixer with a proper month-long Club World Cup event. I think it really fits the world we live in now, and I think that the US will do it really well because they're the US and they, do everything like that fantastically. A bit of a a dry run for the World Cup as well. So for the actual World Cup in 2026. So yeah, I think that people will kind of say, oh, that's not going to be big. I don't care about that. I don't care about that. And then when it's June, July 2025 and there's not much football on the telly, I think you'll see quite a lot of people watch that.
I don't think it's going to be a huge hit. I think it's going to be considered massive by the South American sides, and basically the non-European teams that end up playing in it will consider it massive because it's a chance, as you know, they cling on to those sorts of results from the 50s and 60s down in Argentina, the toppling of a European side in a Club World Cup of the past. But I don't think the European players and managers are going to be enamored by it. It might be a success maybe with fans, but I don't think we'll see European clubs treating it much more than a glorified friendly tournament, basically. I don't see it as being a success. What I do think is important to recognise is what you touched on a moment ago, which is it being kind of the precursor for hosting World Cups. And, you used to have the Confederations Cup, where a handful of nations obviously would go across and kind of test the waters in some of the stadiums, etc. I think it will be massively important for World Cup bids in the future of testing, see how stadiums look, etc. But I can't see European clubs buying into it because it's a long way to go.
Real Madrid will, though.
It's more games.
Like the biggest brand in the world, biggest sporting brand in the world. I think Real Madrid fans will get pretty excited when they lift that one.
I don't know.
There's going to be, Ollie, there's going to be a lot of NASP pods, June and July, where there's not going to be an awful lot to talk about. Well, I mean, there's always stuff to talk about in the sporting world, but you know what I mean. June, July, we're going to go pretty heavy on the Club World Cup.
Tennis season, golf season.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. There's still a
to
football void.
Away.
There's still the 30-minute NSAP, window to talk about football. So we'll see about that one.
Maybe. This is Windsor trying to big it up to keep the listeners listening over those 2 months. I see what you're doing. It's going to be a huge tournament, guys. Could easily go into the Trump thing. Great tournament, really great. A lot of players coming across.
One of our listeners really liked your Pep impression the other day, by the way, Ollie. I meant to tell you. Branching out from the Trump, he's on Guardiola. Let's talk about 2024. Two questions for you, Ollie. The questions are, what was the craziest or wildest sporting moment of the year? And the second is, what was the best broadcast line of the year? I'll go first here, Ollie, while you kind of have a think. So for me, the wildest or best sporting moment of the year was, it's a toss-up. It's between Rachel Gunn, the Australian breakdancer, because who obviously got widely criticised for her very, let's call it, unique breakdance routine, and later kind of apologized for it all. I think that was incredible because it really started to scratch an uncomfortable surface of like what is the Olympics and what is a sport. And I think the reason that resonated, and the reason I think it really got to people, was because what she did was kind of farcical, but then you could argue the Olympics has become kind of farcical, and I think she was just shining a light on that. So I found that absolutely fascinating. And then for me, the Pep Guardiola breakdown, and most notably the game where he kind of spent the whole game scratching his face, and he goes into the press conference at the end and says, "I want to hurt myself." And I just think that is very, very intoxicating to watch. A man's breakdown is really wild, and from the heights that he hit to be where City are now. So those two. Honourable mention for Coventry in the FA Cup when they nearly knocked out Man United. If it wasn't for the length of a toe on VAR, it would have been the greatest FA Cup game probably of all time. But as these things do, it will get forgotten in the fullness of history. But they were so close to the greatest FA Cup moment of all time, I think. So yeah, those for me. I managed to squeeze in three there, but probably the three for me in terms of craziest, best, wildest moment of 2024.
Yeah, I think John Rahm nearly holing one on 16 in the Ryder Cup to basically win his point on the second day, I think it was like, it's a long par 3, and it was just one of the biggest golf shots at one of the biggest moments in terms of like wild, and when everybody else is around you is tense and carnage, and he just looks so smooth and Tommy Fleetwood actually on the hole after he won the Ryder Cup the next day almost hit a hole in one on that hole as well. But that was definitely one. I mean, Rory McIlroy pulling the driver out and sending it into the dirt on the 18th and lipping 2 putts as well in the final round of the US Open is just something like two 3-foot putts. And one of them, the first one that he did was the first time he'd missed in 3 foot all year. Like the first, and it comes on the 16th of the US Opens to have the lead was just I cannot underestimate how much I enjoyed watching that goal. It was everything about sport that I like. It was tension. It was 2 great players producing their best, letting the moment get to them as well, and then rallying back, particularly obviously DeChambeau. So yeah, that was wild. Not many wild moments in football, really.
Agree.
I'll tell you what, the wildest moment was that stamp during Colo Colo Cerro Porteño that I commentated on in the Libertadores.
You might have missed it,
because that was you probably didn't see it, but 2 sides that had the exact same kind of goals scored home, goals scored away, goals scored, goal difference, points, games won, all that going into the last round of the group stage in the Libertadores, and Colo Colo against Cerro Porteño in Paraguay, and Colo Colo are getting beat, and guy just tries to, Colo Colo winning, and Cerro Porteño player just tries to literally stamp through the shin from behind of a player. And it was like, that's GBH. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in football. You can talk about Roy Keane's foot through Haaland, but that was the equivalent and would have killed somebody's career had he actually got it done in the manner in which he wanted to. That was ridiculous. But aside from that, we didn't have any fire extinguishers. We didn't see anything like too crazy in South America this year. I tell you what was weird when we were talking about looking back at 2024. How little, in terms of great moments, came from the Euros.
I agree. I think from an individual nation's perspective, I would think, mate, like Bellingham's overhead kick was kind of a great summer moment. And if England go on and win the tournament, then it's a moment people talk about forever. But I felt like 2024, there was lots of kind of nearly moments. Like I said, that Coventry FA Cup game, if they do that, it's honestly the greatest kind of FA Cup game of all time. So there are lots of nearly moments in the year. But go Ollie.
McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship in the Formula One, and for the first time in like 13, 14 years, something like that, the team that won the Drivers' Championship not winning the Constructors. And the comeback they had this year from being, probably looking like the 4th fastest car on the grid, maybe something like that, to having Lando Norris in the second half of the year pushing for the Drivers' World Championship and taking that Constructors' title was, again, pretty incredible. It was just a shame that we had the dull consistency of Max Verstappen just still being good enough to see the whole thing out. But it wasn't like a amazing Formula One season. It was good, but we were on the cusp of greatness with that. Like the tennis world. I mean, the most interesting thing that happened in tennis surely was Nick Kyrgios in the last few days slagging off the sport for having the 2 world number ones in the men and women's game going up on doping charges.
He called it disgusting, and he said it's embarrassing for tennis, or maybe not the word embarrassing, but an equivalent of that. He certainly called it disgusting. I think it's the doping and drugs in tennis and sports really interesting now, because I do think it's extremely nuanced in the sense that the rules are so strict now that you can genuinely fail a drugs test because you've eaten the wrong food at the wrong time, or you had too much of this type of honey. Like, those things are real, and the intention behind it is really, really good, because you want to stop people cheating. But it's so extreme that I do think it is catching people who aren't what you would consider to be a drugs cheat and are just being a bit sloppy with their medication or their diet. Is that acceptable? No, it's not. Should they still be penalised? Absolutely, they should. But I think this is not Lance Armstrong, by the way. This is a different thing to that. So, Iga Swiatek, is she cheating because she, is she cheating, or is she just not adhered to the rules 100% all the time? And I do think that it's, outside looking in, it's not as black and white as they're a drugs cheat or they're not. It's the minutiae of like diet and medication that tweaks some of your biomarkers a percent too high or percent too low. So I'm not going to get into the actual like details of it all, but it's very complicated, to be honest.
Do you think tennis is in trouble going into 2025?
Yeah, because paddle's a better sport.
Lost Federer. I mean, we're losing tennis courts, let alone great players, but we've lost Federer and Nadal. I mentioned a moment ago the idea of, we need to get a LeBron James in the NBA, another figurehead at least of the sport. Every sport relies on that face. We had Ronaldo and Messi for so many years. That's great when you've got two. Tennis had three, maybe even four, obviously, if you throw in Andy Murray as well. And I look at the tennis world, and aside from Nick Kyrgios, who seems to make more headlines with his comments rather than his tennis play, if you said to me who are the number one in the world, men and women in tennis right now, I wouldn't be able to pick them out in a lineup, let alone know their names. It's weird how it's fallen. And you talk about Raducanu, like at least in Britain, I think we need a British star to start coming through again, because Wimbledon's great, but if you haven't really got a dog in the fight for it's just middle class people going drinking champagne and having strawberries with a bit of sporting action.
I mean, mate, outside of Wimbledon, British people don't care about tennis. Like, they really don't. They couldn't tell you how many slams there are when they're. I'm being harsh. If you're a tennis fan, you could, but otherwise, you really couldn't. I think tennis. I agree that we're at the end of a golden era. You look at the women's game as well, like the end of Serena Williams and things like that. We're at the end of a golden era of recognisable characters and names that transcend the sport, but I always think that gets replaced. The bigger problem for tennis, and this isn't just an issue for tennis, it's for many other sports, there are other more dynamic, nimbler, cheaper, easier sports that are coming through that are garnering more attention. I'm using paddle as an example. It might not be paddle that takes all this attention away from tennis, but a paddle court is smaller, it's cheaper, it's easier to hold a rally, and it's easier to enjoy a game. So if you're 7 years old, to actually start playing tennis, you need quite a high level of technique for it to become enjoyable. Whereas paddle, this is part of the success of football, by the way, because you can be absolutely rubbish and still enjoy a game of five-a-side, and still the game moves on, right? Whereas tennis, you need a level of ability to keep playing, to get the ball across the net, which a lot of people will never reach because they're disheartened straight away. So I think tennis has got to be super careful. I mean, I think loads of sports need to be careful that younger, snappier, more clipped, more dynamic, shorter, more explosive, more TikTok-friendly versions of traditional sports could easily take hold. So yeah, that's where I think tennis needs to be a little bit careful. Let's go on to the best broadcast line of 2024. You won't hear this in many pods, mainly just waited because Wilson and I obviously in sports broadcasting. I've got two. I'm just going to say one, Ollie. I might be stealing this. You might have the same one in mind. But I just think Gary Neville's blue £1 billion bottle job line for Chelsea after they lost the Carabao Cup final against a youthful Liverpool side was really, really clever and well-timed and apt for that moment. I think that, look, alliteration's always a winner at a big moment, and I think he had a moment to think about that line. I'm sure he had the framework of it all week, but the way the game played out to call Chelsea the blue £1 billion bottle jobs, because they spent £1 billion in the transfer market, was very, very snappy, and I think it's a line that will hold strong until Chelsea go and win a Champions League or a Premier League, and then he looks pretty silly. But I think it's up there with Alan Hansen's "You'll Never Win Anything with Kids." Like, it's a great line at the time, and then maybe later on it becomes a bit redundant. But I thought that was a great one. I got a backup as well, but I'll let you go in with yours.
Well, I think firstly, to have any line that stands out is impressive, because we watch and consume, just even as two individuals, let alone as humanity as a whole, so much sport. So for any line to resonate is impressive. Like, I'm trying to, if you'd asked me for one for 12 months ago, I wouldn't be able to tell you now a line from 12 months ago that kind of still stands. So I'm going to be extremely selfish here and say that Peter Drury using the line "creamy" is the best line from any sort of sports broadcast. So let's
give people a bit of context here. So Ollie Wilson used the adjective "creamy" for, I think it was a strike or a goal. This is a few years back. Maybe you sprinkled it.
Was a goal.
It was for a goal, right?
I know exactly what it was. It was the last year at Tottenham, and it was Hull against Tottenham, and it was an Ericsson strike that went into the top corner. It was a lovely hit, and it was for TalkSport. And it was interjecting into a live commentary as well. And I said, he's hit a really creamy strike into the top corner. And throw back to Mataface after the goal. And he just goes, creamy, Ollie? Creamy? I was like, yeah, you know, it's smooth, it's sweet, and it just tastes good, you know. And there was like a chuckle about it and everything like that. And creamy immediately was in the lexicon. And I didn't want to use it loads after that because it's like, I don't know, it becomes like, you don't want it to be your naff calling card. But I'd never heard it before. And yeah, used a little creamy line on
I was listening to that
and
live, and I remember it well because it's exactly as you described. And Mataface was doing his own game, which was like 0-0. That was the live commentary. And I can still hear him saying, creamy, Mr. Wilson? And you had to explain why it was creamy. And I haven't heard it from you saying it then to Peter Drury said it a game the other day, and he was describing a bit of play or like a bit of build-up play, and he said it was creamy. And I just, I thought it was, if Drury's nicking Wilson's lines, then Ollie's onto a winner in terms of the future of sports broadcasting.
Yeah, there's not loads that you sit back and go, that moment was encapsulated. You know, there's still one of the best ever pieces of commentary for me is an NFL one from Joe Buck, who's a great broadcaster in the US anyway. I mean, he literally does the biggest games in the NFL and he does the World Series for Fox. I mean, and will do World Series one night, fly across the country and do an NFL game the next night. And he did the Minnesota Miracle, which was the last play of the game that went about 60 yards for a touchdown. And he just had Diggs, sideline, touchdown, and stayed silent for 90 seconds and just let the whole carnage of the atmosphere take place. And we've discussed this off pod many a time. That is the kind of thing that I would like to happen more. Like, if there's a big moment, just let it sit. Just let it chill.
The confidence to do that, Ollie. And the confidence not just in that moment as a broadcaster, but the confidence also in your status as an employee or a freelancer. Like, you've got to be so confident in who you are, I think, to let it sit for that period. But I completely agree. Some of the best moments of commentary are just so minimal. I mean, even off the top of your head, some people on the pitch, they think it's all over. It is now, and then just letting it sit for 45 seconds, or Michael Thomas against Arsenal.
Do you believe in miracles?
Yeah.
The Al Michaels one, like, it says that, and then it's just let it go, let it happen.
Completely. Say what you see, and then there's nothing you can say that's going to be better than the reaction of the crowd or the players and the emotion that the camera's going to pick up. So, yeah. My other... Yeah. Go for it.
No.
My other broadcast line that I think was very good was Jamie Carragher talking about Casemiro, and he said, leave the football before the football leaves you. And I think it's just very apt when you look at this recent Manchester United decline, which we'll talk about. And I think that... Yeah, I think it was a really, really good line because Casemiro was such a great footballer, and it is kind of embarrassing and weird and awkward and uncomfortable to watch him flailing around completely out of his depth. His legs have completely gone, and I thought it was a good line. Leave the football before the football leaves you.
But that's every athlete, isn't it? I mean, like any South American that's gone back and played until they're 41
Tell that to Rocky
down in South America. I mean... It's not left him. Nah. He's still scoring goals. Rocky's still flying high, man. Yeah. But it is that it's so hard to let go. I mean, Fernando Alonso is over 40 now in Formula One. He's still driving at the peak level, and he can still drive, but it's just not what it was. And maybe the car is an important thing as well, but it's just not what it was like it was when in his pomp. And knowing when to step away, I think, is more difficult. And you see it in every walk of life. You see it in commentators and broadcasters, knowing when I can't actually do that moment justice, or I can't pick up stuff that I need to quickly enough and things like that. It just goes, and some people stick around that bit too long that it goes from being iconic person to kind of just irritating, not that good for what we need at this point. And I think... any business will have that. There'll be the guy that is running the company for too long. He's a bit too old in his ways and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know how you tell someone to step away.
It's a really, really difficult one. All right, let's rattle on to the Premier League, Ollie, because I want to talk about Ruben Amarim and Manchester United.
Oh, if you're talking about great moments or great lines, in commentary, Gary Neville summed it up perfectly that pound for pound, and I think he's talking financially rather than physical pounds, obviously, Manchester United are the worst side in the Premier League. And I think for every pound spent on that side, what you're getting for those pounds is utterly rubbish.
Ollie, by it was absolute distance. It's not even close when you look at the wages and the money spent in that squad to the quality that they've got now. They are by so far the worst pound for pound side in the Premier League. It's insane. Ollie, Manchester United have lost 4 games in a row. The next 2 are away at Liverpool in the Premier League and away at Arsenal in the FA Cup. Not definitely, but probably they will lose those 2 games. Manchester United would then have lost 6 games on the spin. Apparently, according to ChatGPT anyway, and I dug around for this has not happened since the 1930s, okay? 6 games on the spin. After that, so assuming they lose those 2 games and they've lost 6 on the spin, they play Southampton at home. I would put it to you, Mr. Wilson, that Ruben Amarim cannot lose that football match. He can lose against Liverpool on Sunday, they're top of the Premier League. He can lose against Arsenal in the FA Cup. It's not about the FA Cup for Manchester United this season. He cannot, after those 2 games, host Southampton, who are the worst Premier League side I've seen in years, and lose that game. He cannot lose that game. And if he does, I think there's a real decision for Ineos to make. And it sounds ridiculous because Amorim's obviously a top coach and this is not his fault. This is not his fault. He inherited this mess. It's a chaotic mess. It's a rotten structure to the club. It's a confused hierarchy. It's a group of footballers that don't want to be there or shouldn't be there or are embarrassed to be there. It's not his fault, but it is his responsibility to fix this. And I think if I've learned one thing from watching Premier League football over the years and football and sport in general, it's like, do not underestimate how things can spiral very quickly, and more importantly, how panic can dictate things. Like, panic can really shape sport in a way you can't believe. So I think Ruben Amarim, the next 2 games are big, of course. If he can nick a point at Anfield, that's great, gets them back on track. If they could do something incredible against Arsenal in the FA Cup, amazing. But the game after that, January the 16th against Southampton, that is, you cannot lose that football match, Ruben Amarim.
So we were talking about Amorim, why is he taking this job? Kind of questioning his reasons. Did he just not understand how big the job at United was, etc., that's in front of him? But there's also something to be said about somebody at Manchester United making the change when they did with Ten Hag. Because if you're going to keep Amorim around until the end of this year, regardless of what happens, and then let him find his feet with a couple of windows, obviously this winter and next summer under his belt, etc., that would be the most logical thing that you could really think of, right? Of, look, whatever happens in the remainder of the season, we give him time. That was the whole point of Ferguson, why he stayed in the job for as long as he did, because he was given 3 years of kind of time to build United into what they became under him. Football scenario and landscape is very different now, obviously. And everybody thought United would do that with Moyes, etc. However, and I was thinking about this the other day, why on earth did they bring Amorim and make the managerial change when they did? If you're giving Amorim that sort of time, why don't you just give Ten Hag that time till the end of the season and give Amorim a full summer as soon as this season's done to come in, finish his work with Sporting, come in, assess, gets that window, and you kind of start with a blank slate, right? So they're obviously expecting results, form, and things to change. But if you're expecting things to change by bringing Amorim in, you have to recognise how bad this team is right now as well. So the more I think about it, the more I question why the managerial change was made at this point. Not just with Amorim taking it, but why United made that decision at that point. Because either there's somebody at United that very much believes in the pieces that they have and that it's the right manager to put them together, and doesn't recognise that a terrible attitude around the club and the business can't be resolved overnight, which is ludicrous to think. And so I kind of agree with you that if things don't change, not just, I don't think it's as dramatic as after that game against Southampton, but I think if you get into that game, if you get into mid-February and United are still sliding, I 100% think that they'll pull the trigger and go, nah, we're not having this. And the only thing really that's saving United a little bit is the fact that I think City, obviously with their struggles, is kind of taking a bit of focus off that. And we've got used to United being nowhere near at that level of competing for titles anyway at this point. But I think if you get to mid-February, there is a strong chance that Amorim isn't sticking around if things don't dramatically change. And none of it really I put down on the manager at all. I think it's such an insane position now to see this United set up as it is. And when you look at every decision that gets made, nothing seems logically thought out at all.
Ollie, is there a chance that the cycling guy doesn't actually know what he's doing? Like, he's got a Sir in front of his name, so everyone's like, oh, he must know everything. And it's like, maybe not. Like, maybe the cycling guy isn't the best guy to fix Manchester United Football Club. I don't know. And I think we'll talk about the New Year's honours list later on, because I want to talk about Gareth Southgate getting knighted. But just because you've got a Sir in front of your name, and look, read through the list of who got a knighthood, and I want to rant about this later, and tell me if that means they're fantastic at their job, because I don't think it does. So, yeah, I think, look, Manchester United aren't getting relegated. They're 7 points clear of the drop zone, and I think that there's just about enough quality in their squad, and there's definitely three worse sides than them. So they're not going to get relegated. But for my money, Manchester United have got two objectives the rest of the season. One is don't get relegated, and the second is don't sack Ruben Amarim. Like, just those two things. And then get to the summer and figure it out. But I would say that they're 7 points above, and if you go to kind of 4 points above the, 5, 4, 3 points above that relegation zone, Ollie, as I used the word panic earlier, the possibility of someone in the Manchester United hierarchy, very senior, I'm talking like one of the Glazers, saying, this cannot happen. We cannot get relegated, and just hauling Amorim out and putting Gary Neville or like Eric Cantona in. And I mean that, like, once you get to that point where, oh my God, we could actually get relegated, and they're not there yet. But if they get to that point, then I do think you'll see something crazy happen at the top, because Manchester United cannot get relegated. That cannot happen. So, and it won't happen. I mean, it won't happen. But I do think that they lose against Liverpool and then they're home against Southampton. I think there's a lot on that football match. Ruben Amarim, Ollie, I mean, I said it when he joined. I'll say it now. He strikes me as an incredible communicator, obviously an intelligent man, high IQ, blah, 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 blah. But he made a bad career decision, and we all do that. And if he turns it around from this point, the man is a fucking genius. If he can turn it around from if he can take Manchester United, Ollie, from here as we stand on Tuesday the 31st of December 2024 to a position where they're challenging for the title in a few years, the man is a genius.
Who made a worse decision is Joshua Zirkzee. I feel so sorry for this kid. Getting booed off after 35 minutes at Old Trafford by your own fans, when you literally could have gone so many other places after last season. Came through with this unbelievable run for Bologna, like the great hope of that Bologna side. I'd have just stuck in Italian football. I don't know a single player that looks at Manchester United this January window and goes, that's a place I want to be there for part of the turnaround. Like, how do you attract the players that you need to keep you from sliding down the league, let alone get you anywhere near some sort of European position? And then you look at, because you made a point last night about Amorim, you think he's trying to impart a system that doesn't work for the players that he's got. But how does he bring in the players that he needs to have that system? I mean, you hear managers bringing their staff across. Just fucking bring half that Sporting Lisbon side across if that's what's going to work like at this point, because I don't know how else. There's no star power draw at this club in the position they're in right now, both on and off the pitch.
I'd worry about a coach. I understand having an idea, I really do. But I'd worry about a coach that comes in and looks at that group of players and thinks that he can implement what is still, it's a fairly niche system. Not the majority of people don't play three at the back. The vast majority of top sides don't play three at the back. Some do, and successfully, and Conte and whatever. But like most don't do that. And to think you can walk into a shit show of a football club, implement quite an alternative system mid-season, I think is extremely overconfident. And even if that's your system, I wonder if he could have gone there and for 6 months just kept the basis of what Ten Hag was doing. Don't get relegated, have a crack at one of the cups. So I know that's his system, and he's gonna, he'll die by that. And he said that in the interview yesterday. But I'm not sure it displays like a colossal amount of intelligence to do that. Ollie, he cannot have realised how big a task this was. Like he can't have done. He must have been sold something different, because he would not have gone there if he'd realised just how rotten the football club is.
I mean, it's one of the worst scoring sides in the Premier League. I can't believe that you look at United as the 4th lowest scorers in English football right now and think, and considering the amount they spend on attacking midfielders and anybody up in that forward line to be able to find goals. But the only reason for Amorim to impart his way now is if he knows and believes that he has the ability, he's got the time to implement his football now so that by next year everybody knows what they're playing with and he can make the personnel changes. That's the reason why you do it. That's the long game. That's the chess rather than checkers. It's not about this year. If United have said, you've got this year, regardless of what happens, unless you get us in that bottom 3, you carte blanche. Do whatever you need to do with this side, with the players, with the system. Work that. And that would be about the only intelligent way for Amorim and Manchester United to go about their business of saying, we're playing a long game because we are screwed as a football club at this point in English football. They're not anywhere near the likes of Chelsea. I'd much rather be a Tottenham manager right now, because I genuinely think that what Ange Postecoglou is doing is hindering Tottenham as opposed to what United are doing. You know what I mean?
Say that again. Sorry.
There's one problem at Tottenham.
You think Ange Postecoglou is hindering Tottenham or isn't?
Yeah. Ange Postecoglou is the problem.
I agree with you.
He doesn't.
I agree with you.
He doesn't have the ability to pull the reins in. So you've got one individual figure at Tottenham that's a problem. At Manchester United, it's a huge thing. So I would United to me aren't in such more dire straits than a side like Tottenham are, let alone going into the
I agree with that 100%.
By the way, can we just give some flowers to Nottingham Forest as well? It's just fucking amazing what they're doing this season.
I think at Manchester United, the ideal situation, or probably the only way to fix this, is to get to the summer, don't get relegated, keep Ruben Amarim, and sell 80% of the players. Fill your entire squad with academy players. Obviously, try and bring 5 or 6 in the summer. And start again, like from scratch, because the squad's so rotten. You need to get rid of like at least 10, probably 15% of that squad, because they're trash and they don't care. And then you bring in academy players, but then, you're risking, are we going to be in a relegation battle again? You need to make sure you're not getting relegated. Casemiro, half these players, Xerxes on a 5-year contract. So what do they do with him?
Academy players aren't like that these days, though, as well. I mean, like, gone are the days where you'd bring an academy player in at 19 and he's ready to go, because if he's ready to go at 19, he's going to be either somewhere else at 17, 18, or he's playing in that United setup already. Thinking about how Barca brought through that generation, for instance, and United did with the class of 92. I don't think we see that ever again, because those were exceptional circumstances at exceptional academies. And what I would say now is that most of these football clubs have academy setups to rival what United had at that point in terms of scouting networks and things like that, because everybody copies each other in all sports, in business, in everything. So everybody's gone out and done a similar thing, and I don't think you get, particularly having worked on things like the UEFA Youth League and stuff like that quite a lot, I don't think you get that same like golden generation of players that come through in that point, because it's far more fractured and opened up in that sense. So chucking a load of academy players is like, just see that's the guaranteed way to cripple your side, at least in the Premier League, because if they're not playing in the first team ready, they're not ready.
Wild situation. Amorim 25-1 now to be the next Premier League manager to lose his job. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen, but every game now is loaded with jeopardy. Let's move on. I don't want to bang on and on about Isak, so I'm just going to ask you one question about Alexander Isak, Ollie. Let's say Arsenal were 2 points off Liverpool at the top of the Premier League table, 2 points behind Liverpool. Would it be crazy then if Arsenal bid 150 million for Isak this January? Would you still think that was crazy if they felt that was going to win them the league? You know, because they're a little bit far back now, so they might think, well, we could buy Isak for a crazy amount and we might not win the league anyway. Let's just get to the summer and reshuffle then. But if they were level on points with Liverpool, would you understand it more if they went massive for Isak in January?
Maybe. I mean, January just in general is you've got the January sales, except in football where everything's 20% more expensive because everyone's going. I think so. I think people can. I think it's smarter and cheaper to buy in the summer than it is to buy in the
Van Dijk,
buy in the winter, because you can manipulate. The teams know what they want and what they need. So if you've got a side, particularly like an Arsenal, for instance, if they were just off a Premier League title race, so to speak, then you go, fuck it. Well,
Virgil van Dijk was bought in January.
We can just squeeze.
I mean, there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
I know you're talking generally, but
I mean, we had the glory years as well of things like Andy Carroll and Fernando Torres made their big moves, obviously in January as well. I think a lot more of the wild of transfer fees get paid in January. I mean, I've got no evidence to back that up. I'm just going on kind of recall.
hey, that's the basis of this entire podcast. So don't worry about that, Ollie. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble.
NASP, common sense, no research. But it's also the idea of, I think, in a summer you hear flitters from May about summer moves. January is like we get to January 1st tomorrow and it's suddenly the floodgates open. And there's loads of moves that have maybe been rumoured a touch, but a lot of the ones that we've seen in the past that have been big money moves haven't necessarily been like clear cut, saw that one coming. So I think you get a bit more surprises, and then that adds to the shock of some of the fees that get paid as well. So yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be unreasonable if Arsenal were 2 points off, but then if they're only 2 points off, you'd say, well, look, Trent Alexander-Arnold's going to Real Madrid. Mo Salah's still not got a deal sorted. Those two could end up downing tools for the second half of the season for various reasons.
They won't.
I don't think they would. I think
they.
And then it takes one injury on like a Van Dijk or somebody, and suddenly Liverpool are down 3 players, and what do they do then? I mean, it's not inconceivable that they drop off still.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of those sorts of questions around this Liverpool side.
One injury for Virgil van Dijk and the whole title race changes. Van Dijk was out for 2 months. Then the entire title race changes. I think that's fair. Let me ask you, Ollie, who's the most underrated Premier League manager? I've got 2 questions. Firstly, who's the most underrated Premier League manager? And secondly, if Nuno Espírito Santo finishes in the top 4 with Nottingham Forest, is that a better achievement than if Arne Slot wins the title with Liverpool?
Second question first, yes. Yes, because Arne Slot stepped into a club that was ready, that has players and personnel ready to compete at the level that Liverpool are competing at, right? And so if you're the new manager bounce, the extra dose of tonic, or you've got just that little refresh idea, as we've seen from Arne Slot this season, Forest being anywhere near the top 4 is unthinkable. And this is obviously a huge if, and we're nowhere near in the situation that we were when Leicester won the title at this point at Christmas, right? But if Forest were able to even stick it out and be involved in like an actual title race come the end of the year, if they won the Premier League, the only thing I think that would prevent it being as good as Leicester's title victory is the fact that Leicester almost went down the previous year and were like very much on that ultra cusp of relegation, whereas Forest were always fighting for their lives in the relegation battle, but it wasn't quite the same.
Because
as
they've won 2
Leicester's
European Cups. Like I know it was a long time ago, but because Nottingham Forest do have a bit of, and I think they've won the league once as well. So like they do have that bit of history in Nottingham Forest where they did win 2 Champions Leagues, 2 European Cups. So Leicester would still
that
be
adds to it to me. That makes it better than Leicester to me. That's one of the things that would make it better, because I'm like, look at this phoenix risen from the ashes. Like this was a club that were at the peak of European football and then got burnt and torn down to pieces and were down in the lower leagues of English football, and now look at them fighting. I mean, it's an absolutely beautiful story.
So is he the most underrated manager in the Premier League then? Because I think Marco Silva is, but who do you think?
I mean, it's hard not to go with Nuno Espírito Santo. Iraola at Bournemouth as well this season is a really good shout in terms of Bournemouth, like now, just play with no fear, and it's a really difficult place to go on the South Coast, particularly if you get them in like midweek or on a night game. It just that extra tension from a small ground that's close to the pitch under the lights brings something a little bit special. So yeah, I think I'll go with that, to be honest.
All right, let's talk about Gareth Southgate being knighted. I also want to talk about Sadiq Khan being knighted as well.
Tell me who on the list of knighthoods you think deserved it. That'd be a shorter conversation, I think, Dave.
Alan Titchmarsh. Just because, like,
good with gardening.
I just think it's funny
enough.
to be
nice guy.
To be knighted for gardening. I think to be knighted, you need to be so unequivocally fantastic at your leadership position, or you need to have done something utterly outstanding within your community that is obviously like for good. That would be my criteria. So Gareth Southgate and Sadiq.
Wait, can we compare being knighted to the elite gold category of British Airways? I think this is where you're going here, in that it's become
it really
too open.
Wasn't, but we were talking about Olly's a massive. He's one of these points guys. Absolutely loves it. And British Airways have changed their loyalty system. And as soon as I saw that this morning, I just baited Olly by sending him the link, and I got like this tower of text back explaining it all or whatever.
It's become too easy to get the gold. That's what British Airways are thinking, so they're just making it more difficult. And we need to do the same with knighthoods, is where we're going as a
but you need to
look at it, because
so like, okay, let's just because I think they're kind of interesting as two things, Sadiq Khan and Gareth Southgate. So Gareth Southgate is like, he did well at his job, right? Like, nice guy, did well at his job, but wasn't exceptional. Like, didn't do something that you'll be talking about in 100 years. Like, so why has he been knighted? Like, and Sadiq Khan, like, probably a really nice guy. I don't know, never met him. But a phone gets stolen every 6 minutes in London. Like, 1,000 phones get stolen a week. And the Met Police solves 2% of those. Like, that's not all Sadiq Khan's fault. He's not stealing those phones himself, but he's the mayor of the city. And it's like, you know how when we were young, Ollie, people used to say Barcelona's really dangerous. Oh, there's so many pickpockets in Barcelona. And that used to be the thing. And that may be true now. It may not be true. I don't know. But that was the thing. And like, it's stuck for life. And now I'm embarrassed when I tell people that come to London, oh, be careful of your phone. Like, I'm embarrassed to do that. So yeah, Sadiq Khan being knighted's game's gone for me. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. And Gareth Southgate also, like, I don't think he should be knighted. And there's loads of other people that shouldn't be knighted there as well. But
not another Southgate and not another Sadiq podcast. Is that what NASP stands for?
Or maybe they're both like amazing people and they've done exceptional jobs and they should be knighted. Play devil's advocate, Ollie. Give me the case why Southgate and Sadiq Khan should have been knighted.
Well, I was struggling for it because I was trying to think of it, and all I could think of was, wouldn't it feel a bit like a pity knighthood, Southgate? Like, I mean, look. Holding the England manager's position for a long period of time is an achievement in itself, right? In terms of, but you're paid very well for that. You don't need a knighthood for staying in the job and doing enough to stay in the job. And that's what he's done with some of the best generations of footballers that we've had in this country. And when you look down, Sir Alf Ramsey won the World Cup. Like, that's the pinnacle. Sir Alex Ferguson. What he's did for Manchester United and for English football, let's face it pissed the Scots off no end, but he propelled the English game with that United side to incredible heights. Deserves a knighthood. Sir David Beckham, he was a pretty face. That I'd never.
God, he's good at branding. Like, I don't know. Like, should his brand manager get the knighthood instead? Like, Sir David Beckham's brand manager.
His publicist is done wonders for the world of publicity, I guess. Know. But I'd never say Beckham was the greatest right midfielder of all time or the greatest right midfielder in English history or anything like that. So, the only thing with Southgate is like, English football's bar has dropped so low on the international stage in terms of falling so short so many times, unbearably short. Losing that first game in South Africa, embarrassing to kick off the World Cup in a long time ago now.
When was that?
2010.
Yeah.
2010.
Bloody hell.
Yeah. Bloody hell. Well, we're definitely becoming Victor Meldrews. We're miserable and we can't remember the dates and stuff.
Tomorrow we're closer to 2050 than we are to the year 2000.
I remember working out how old I'd be in the year 2000 as a kid and being like, wow, I'll be like 12 years old. Whoa. Not to give away my age there, but yeah. But yeah, so I just... The thing is that what he has done is that he's at least brought a fair bit of pride back to the English national team. He's put us on incredible stages and given us opportunities and incredible moments. And regards to the flack he took at the last tournament, it comes down to players for some part of it that didn't get the job done. So maybe that's where Southgate deserves a knighthood. But like the other thing with Southgate is because he doesn't come across as a real like bullish manager. Like I can't imagine him grabbing people by the neck in the dressing room and, you know, Neil Warnock old school style or something like that, which is probably a good thing, to be honest. But, and he's held the position with great decorum. There's been no sexual allegations against him like Sven-Goran Eriksson. He's not been done in any gambling or whatever. Like, yeah. He stayed in the job longer than Sam Allardyce. But, so he has been like that great figurehead in the same way Queen Elizabeth II, whether you like the monarchy or not, she was an incredible figurehead of state for England. And Southgate has taken to office as England manager and stayed as a very reputable person. But considering he has this slightly meekness around him, and then like, you remember the Pizza Hut adverts after the
assault charges.
No, it's not Sven. There's been no sexual impropriety.
Well, that is true, actually. Like, Sven. Yeah. So yeah, sexual assault was the wrong phrase. Sexual impropriety, shall we say? There's been no erroneous dealings like a Sam Allardyce. You know, he's walked out of the job respectfully, unlike a Capello who's marched out. Kevin Keegan was doing that like businessman who's losing it all on the stock exchange with the loose tie and the it's all gone wrong kind of thing. You know. He's been a figurehead for English football and taken us to some of the greatest moments that we've had as a country for a long period of time. Gardner and
but it does seem like a pity.
Yeah,
it does seem like a pity.
Look, Gardner and broadcaster Alan Titchmarsh has said he is thrilled and delighted to have been recognised in the King's New Year's Honours list. Titchmarsh, 75, who grew up in West Yorkshire, blah, 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 has been honoured for their achievements or their contribution to national life. I mean, yeah, like, I don't know, yeah. Great. I don't know, Ollie. Maybe I'm just maybe that's a good thing. I mean, he also probably no sexual assault charges against him. So right, let's.
That has to be a prerequisite for being knighted, though, to have not had any.
Yeah, you'd like. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But then a few people have like been knighted and then it's been withdrawn though because there have been sexual assault charges. So yeah. Wayne Rooney got sacked as Plymouth manager. What are the learnings from this? not to tie in the sexual assault charges because I don't believe there have been any against Wayne Rooney either. But
no.
Look, I mean, don't hire coaches just because they played football would be a pretty good start. I would have thought. Like, did Wayne Rooney do anything? Has he done anything to suggest it'd be a good appointment for Plymouth Argyle? I mean, zero connection to the regional football club. I mean, you know, the kind of the Frank Lampard, I was going to say Steven Gerrard, but Gerrard did actually do well at Rangers, didn't he? So I don't know. There's I mean, Wayne Rooney at Plymouth Argyle, it didn't work. Did anyone think it was going to work? I don't know. I suppose they have to have a go somewhere, but maybe not in the Championship. Maybe lower.
Well, he's held 3 positions in English football and 1 in MLS. He was terrible with Derby, he was terrible with Birmingham, and he was terrible with Plymouth. And the only reason for hiring Wayne Rooney is for marketability. To have that face, appease advertisers, keep that big name around, etc. That works for a few weeks. But I don't really understand why the guy wants to be rushing into football management all the time when he's clearly not capable yet. Go and sit under a good manager. For all the kind of faults that you talk about with Arteta's emotion on the sidelines and stuff, he went and sat underneath Guardiola and learnt from somebody who's considered one of the best managers in football. He didn't just go running out there and go, I'm going to be the top dog. It's lunacy, absolute lunacy. And I think it's just ego and a desire to still be in that dressing room atmosphere. And I don't know the ins and outs of that, kind of how Rooney is with his players and everything like that, but I could imagine him still trying to be one of the boys a bit. And it's never good when the boss is trying to be that, because it just doesn't work out. I have no idea if that's the case, but I could just see it. That some people don't know when to let go of. You spoke about letting go of the sport when it leaves you, letting go of like the team atmosphere. Team sports are great. There's nothing better than working together and being part of something and building something. But there's a big difference between the dressing room and the manager's office, and trying to keep hold of the team and being part of the team aspect, I think, is a really dangerous thing for a lot of football players and managers that keep going, searching for it. But yeah, he's got a rubbish managerial record. I don't know who would hire him now.
I mean, someone will, won't they? Because as you say, like, I guess you can make money out of it, even if he's there for 6 months. Bit of merch, ticket sales, etc., etc. It makes sense. I think, like, for Wayne Rooney, is maybe try and manage a club that's around Merseyside. I don't know, going down to Plymouth Argyle, it's like you have like on a base level, you got no connection with that football club at all. David Moyes got an OBE. Kind of unusual, no? Is that? I mean, won the conference league competition that's like 4 years old, but
one more silverware than Southgate. So I mean,
maybe it should have been Sir David Moyes. You know, why didn't we need to give Joshua Zirkzee a knighthood? You may as well. I mean, just for the way Olly, he took it so well, being subbed off, and he sort of went back and sat on the bench, and the courage that he showed. Why isn't it Sir Joshua Zirkzee? That would be my big question.
Which sports star do you think should get a knighthood come the end of 2025?
So I think, that's a great question. Just quickly, one thing that I think was great is I've forgotten his name. That Rob Burrows, the rugby league player. I think I'm going to butcher this, but someone related to the fundraising there. Yeah. I think maybe he got knighted, or he got some recognition. I remember that was a really heartwarming story, and they raised so much money for was it motor neuron disease, I think. But yeah. So yeah, that I mean, listen, there's some really good stuff, and obviously Ollie and I are picking apart the funny bits because there's some very questionable decisions. But there's obviously some good stuff in there as well. Which sports star at the end of 2025 do I think will get knighted?
Or would you like to see get knighted? And
have you got one in mind? Because I need a bit of thinking time for this.
No, I was thinking of a bit of thinking time, but I quite like the idea of like Bukayo Saka finishing as like a top scorer or something like that. Yeah, you know, something really rogue, like a youngster does something a bit meaningless or whatever, becomes like the first Englishman to lead the goal scoring tally in the Premier League with a sterling second half of this season, pushes Arsenal towards a title fight, and he ends up in like the honours list because, well, yeah, just give him one, that would be good. He played well for England, right? Good.
Yeah, I don't know. Gosh, I'll have to think about it. It might be one for next week to pull back on, but there's some...
Justin Rose wins a major in the latter part of his golfing career. He wins a major next year and is a wild card pick for the Ryder Cup team that win at Bethpage Black for Team Europe, even though I don't think it will happen. And Justin Rose, for services to golf, ends up with a knighthood. That'd be a fun one, because Justin Rose is like the most normal seeming person from what I've seen of him, from like some YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. He's just really normal and really likes golf, but he's also not like a super charismatic, bantery type bloke or whatever. He just seems like a nice guy. I would love to sit down and have a beer with Justin Rose, but I would never be like, let's get him as the lead speaker at X, Y, or Z or whatever. And I think he'd be just like a really good, placid knighthood of just people that go, yeah, that's all right.
Sir Luke Littler?
Oh, that would be great, wouldn't it? And he wears the, what do they get? They get the kind of medal, don't they, around the neck. And he wears that at Ali Pally next Christmas.
I
lines up on the oche with it round his neck.
Or like, who's in charge of VAR? Maybe some kind of ref. I'd like to see a referee get something. Maybe David
Howard
Coote
Webb
comes back
gets it
and
as
like
the head
comes
of the
back in the Saudi
referees.
league, and David Coote like makes loads of great decisions, and then everyone's like clamouring for him to get back in the Premier League, and then Sir David Coote. I mean, that talk about a sporting comeback. If David Coote came back as a referee in like the Costa Rican third tier, was fantastic. Climbed up the ranks, and then ended up, refereeing at the World Cup or something in 2026. That'd be yeah.
Yeah, Uriah Rennie or David Coote getting.
Yeah. All right. Any other business, or does that wrap up the year?
No, I think we're pretty good, to be honest. I think 2024 is done and dusted. The
Wilson doors are open for the big Wilson House Party 2024 closeout. Wilson's on the whiskey early afternoon. He's, for the audio listeners, he's shaking his head. He's pretending he doesn't want this the big house party, but it's happening whenever he wants it.
Rotherham, Lincoln City's calling me on New Year's Day, mate. That is the calling of 2025, and it's the game we all wanted to start the year with.
100%. Well, I'll see you tomorrow in the office, Mr. Wilson. Thank you to all the loyal listeners, and we'll see you in 2025.